So, friends, the month of April started with Donald Trump firing his corrupt attorney general, apparently for not successfully prosecuting his perceived enemies. And the month of April ended with Donald Trump's current corrupt acting attorney general bringing a wildly lawless and vindictive prosecution against one of Donald Trump's perceived enemies. Friends, take it from somebody who worked inside the Department of Justice for decades. DOJ has gone rogue. And when this dark chapter in American history is over and the rule of law comes back into the light of day, and it will, Donald Trump's dirty DOJ leadership must be held accountable. Because justice matters. Friends, here's a brief recap of the legal stories for the month that was April 2026. This is like, destroying DOJ for dummies, what they're doing, trying to get rid of the ethical guardrails while sending these incompetents and imbeciles into federal court, exposing the fact that they have no ethical grounding. I mean, these are dire circumstances for our Department of Justice.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially saying, bullies and thugs are the only ones that are welcome here, and it's sort of a wink that we don't want any accountability for violating the standards and the ethics of the profession because we expect them to violate the standards and ethics of the profession. I mean, that's literally, why else would you need to do that?
Well, friends, it looks like Pam Bondi's days are numbered as Attorney General. New reporting reveals that Donald Trump is about to introduce Pam to the undercarriage of a bus. So friends, now that Pam Bondi has been fired and she's no longer Attorney General, it actually frees her up in one really important way. You see, Bondi is licensed to practice law in the state of Florida. And the Florida State Bar has a rule, a policy of not conducting ethics investigations of attorneys who are serving in presidentially appointed positions, like, United States Attorney General. But given that Pam Bondi is no longer serving in a presidentially appointed position, you see where I'm going with this one.
We no longer are laboring under Pam Bondi. I'm not sure you can find anybody less ethical than Pam Bondi to head up the Department of Justice, though I am sure Donald Trump will try. So what are your views now about Bondi being fired, where we might end up, and then what is Bondi now susceptible to by way of ethics investigations down in Florida?
Let me say, I agree with you. Pam Bondi has been a disgrace to the American people. Her legacy in the Department of Justice is going to be marked by some of the most cruel and inhumane actions, let alone some of the most corrupt actions, and then the very attacks on the legal profession. So I'm not shedding a tear that Pam Bondi is out, but we also need to see this for what it is, which is that the White House is in damage control mode.
How are you going to make the adjustment from defense attorney and prosecutor, kind of one of the warriors in the battle, to Court of Appeals, which is just a very different role and a different kind of lawyering?
As a public defender and as a prosecutor, I've always just sought to do the right thing, right? Always sought to make sure that the law is followed. A little different as a defense attorney because I had a client and I had to do, what my client wanted to do within the bounds of the law. But part of the reason that I moved from defense into prosecution, frankly, is because I got tired of asking prosecutors to do what I thought was the right thing. Like, for example, clients that I had that were charged with felony possession of drugs when they were clearly addicts, and begging prosecutors, please do the right thing. It's a misdemeanor possession case. Why are we turning it into a felony when that's not what it was? So part of me stepping into prosecution was wanting to sit in the role of the decision maker, trusting myself to do the right thing.
So, friends, the month of March started with Donald Trump escalating his unconstitutional war against Iran, endangering the lives of our troops. And the month of March ended with Donald Trump escalating his unconstitutional war against Iran, endangering the lives of our troops. Friends, something's gotta give. And it shouldn't be America's standing in the world, and it sure as hell shouldn't be the lives of the men and women of the armed forces. So, friends, it's starting to look like Trump's hack DOJ lawyers may be running court filings by their boss. No, I don't mean the Attorney General. I mean Donald Trump himself. And it's also looking like Donnie may be picking up his beloved Sharpie and making some edits or additions to those court filings before they're submitted to the judge. Let's have a look at one of those court filings, this one involving Donald Trump's ballroom baloney. So, friends, the corruption at the Department of Justice continues unabated as Donald Trump's friends and criminal associates continue to be not just excused for their crimes, but rewarded for them. Let's talk about that, because to a civilized society, justice really does matter. So, friends, we all know by now that Donald Trump fired Pam Bondi as Attorney General, but here's something that we didn't know. According to some reporting by the New York Times, it looks like on her way out the door, Pam Bondi took one last shot at prosecuting the innocent, going after yet another one of Donald Trump's perceived enemies. Remember this brave young woman, Cassidy Hutchinson, who testified to the January 6th House Select Committee? Well, in what looks like a desperate and ultimately failed attempt to keep her job, Pam Bondi opened a revenge-fueled vindictive investigation into Miss Hutchinson with yet another trumped-up allegation of lying to Congress. You know, friends, Pam Bondi has richly earned membership in the Donald Trump Disbarred Lawyers Club. So, friends, in the event you thought Donald Trump's flunkies couldn't possibly get any flunkier, that his lapdogs couldn't be any more subservient, did you hear what Donald Trump's former criminal defense attorney, Todd Blanche, who was just anointed acting attorney general, did you hear what Todd Blanche said in service to dear leader? So, friends, first, Donald Trump tells us, enough with the Epstein files. The country needs to move on. And then, acting Attorney General Todd Blanche says, the Department of Justice is done talking about the Epstein files. But then, talk about a surprising plot twist. Melania Trump dramatically steps to a White House podium and says, not so fast. Let's get congressional hearings back on track. And just like that, the Epstein files come roaring back. So, friends, with this headline, Trump reportedly says he'll issue mass pardons at the end of his presidential term. Donald Trump is clearly signaling that he will be running his executive branch as a criminal enterprise, as a lawless organization, as a corrupt cabal of crooks. And then, at the end of his presidential term, he will pardon those who commit crimes in service to him.
Pentagon Press Corps, rather than load the Pentagon press room with MAGA influencers, that that is illegal, that is unconstitutional, and he's not going to let it happen.
And let me pick up where you just left off. He's not going to let it happen. And yet, it seems to be happening time and time and time again.
So, friends, have you ever heard the saying, politics follows culture, or politics is downstream of culture? Well, as of right now, there are some undeniable cultural signs that things are turning on Donald Trump, culminating in an exploding popularity of support groups for former Trump supporters, former MAGA members. So, friends, as I'm sure you remember, Donald Trump sued the Wall Street Journal for defamation for $10 billion. Put a pin in that. He sued the Wall Street Journal, claiming that a birthday card that purported to be from him, that was written to sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, a birthday card that was published by the Wall Street Journal and attributed to Donald Trump, wasn't really written by him. Well, a federal judge just dismissed Trump's $10 billion lawsuit. So, friends, just when you thought Donald Trump's dirty DOJ leadership couldn't possibly get any cruddier, just when you thought they'd inflicted all the injustice against the American people they could possibly inflict, they stooped to new lows. They are now trying to dismiss, erase the seditious conspiracy, January 6 convictions of the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. That's right. They're trying to use the federal courts. They're trying to use federal judges to help them whitewash January 6th. So, friends, yet another former Trump lawyer is now permanently disbarred. This guy, John Eastman. And I suspect this one really was not a tough call for the California Supreme Court. You know why? Because John Eastman had come up with a scheme to try to overturn Donald Trump's election loss, a scheme that he, Eastman, admitted wasn't legal, but he said, let's try it anyway. Only the best people. So, friends, it's nice to see some progress being made on the rule of law front, because for the first time, a federal ICE agent has been criminally charged for assaulting 2 people in Minneapolis. Moreover, the prosecutor in the case, Hennepin County District Attorney Mary Moriarty, said there are more than a dozen other ongoing criminal investigations involving federal agents and what they did as part of immigration sweeps in Minneapolis. And DA Moriarty said more criminal charges are expected. So, friends, Donald Trump's dirty DOJ leadership is trying to use federal judges to whitewash the January 6th convictions of the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys from the judicial record altogether. And if the judges agree to dismiss those criminal convictions of the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, then Donald Trump's dirty DOJ officials will point to the judicial dismissals as part of proof that the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys now deserve millions of our taxpayer dollars because they were wrongfully prosecuted. That's right, friend. Did you follow that bouncing ball of corruption, Donald Trump is trying to make federal judges complicit in a scheme to steal taxpayer money and give it to insurrectionists. And to the federal judges, we say, just say no.
Because I'm not going to be complicit in you attempting to use me as a federal judge to whitewash this case out of first the court system, and then Donald Trump would like to see it whitewashed from American history altogether. And I'm going to say, you can appeal my refusal to dismiss this case, but I'm not going to be complicit because it's the wrong thing to do. What do you think of that scheme?
That's interesting. Well, because I take the point, because there's no trial, there's no prosecutorial function that has to be taken over by someone else, right? Which is the major practical problem with not granting these motions.
So friends, in the event you thought things couldn't go from bad to worse in the Epstein debacle, we are now starting to hear talk of a possible Trump pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's convicted sex trafficking co-conspirator. Now, granted, at this stage, the talk is primarily from Maxwell's attorney. Still,
can you give us some top-line thoughts about what you're seeing in these, and I'm going to call them bogus weaponization reports being submitted or being made public by the Department of Justice, and what the reality is about how the Civil Rights Division has gone about handling, among other things, FACE Act cases?
That's right. I'm happy to talk about the FACE Act and the general trends that we're seeing in civil rights enforcement. I mean, the change in the Civil Rights Division's enforcement is so profound, it is almost an unrecognizable place from where I worked for 15 years. And we are really seeing the administration seeking to use the tools of civil rights enforcement that are intended to protect equal opportunity to actually turn on those people that they are intended to protect.
So friends, lest we forget, Donald Trump is still being sued for what he did on January 6th, 2021, launching the attack on the United States Capitol, trying to steal a presidential election from the American people. He is still being sued by several police officers who were assaulted that day by his angry mob. He is still being sued by Democratic lawmakers who were under siege that day, courtesy of the Trump-induced and Trump-inspired attack on the U.S. Capitol. And in that ongoing litigation, Donald Trump has taken the position that everything he did that day was a presidential act. So he should be immune from that lawsuit. Well, a federal judge just rejected Trump's immunity claim, and the judge ruled that lawsuit against Donald Trump will move forward. It will proceed. Points of light, friends. Points of light. So, friends, it sure does seem like Kash Patel loves him some defamation suits, because just as he files a new defamation suit, a federal judge tosses one of his other defamation suits. So, friends, Donald Trump's flunky, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, has sure taken a play out of Donald Trump's playbook regarding how to undermine the rule of law. Just say it out loud. Announce your wrongdoing in the harsh light of day, so maybe people will think there's nothing wrong with what you're planning to do. But there is so much wrong with Todd Blanche's attempted destruction of the independence of the Department of Justice. Well, friends, it looks like another Donald Trump vindictive investigation / prosecution bites the dust. Or does it? So, friends, Donald Trump's acting attorney general, Todd Blanche, was just sued for his many violations of federal law, for failing to fully disclose the Epstein files. And he was sued by our friend, independent journalist, and justice warrior, Katie Phang. Katie, we just learned moments ago that the Department of Justice, Donald Trump's dirty DOJ leadership, has again vindictively, in my opinion, indicted James Comey. And what I want to open with is desperation to save his job. Thy name is Todd Blanche. So I want to stop there. I want to throw it to you for first impressions about the latest, vindictive prosecution rodeo.
Well, I suffer from failure of imagination, Glenn, because when I heard the news just a few minutes ago that Comey had been, quote, re-indicted by the Department of Justice, I thought naively that it had to do with their attempts to try to get him for some type of mortgage thing or maybe some type of false statement thing. I mean, Glenn, my brain did not go so far as to think that it could be over an Instagram post over the formation of shells that said 8647, a formation of shells that Comey himself did not put together, something he stumbled upon in a beach in North Carolina that he took a picture of, posted on Instagram, and I think that what it said, if I'm clear, it said literally, ready, I want to make sure that we get this right. He said something to the effect of, oh, cool shell formation on my beach walk. That's all it said. That's it.
So friends, as you may have heard, our friend and independent journalist extraordinaire, Katie Phang, just filed a lawsuit against Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche and the Department of Justice to try to get them to comply with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And do you know why she did it? Well, in part, because justice matters.
It's for sure. Justice matters. Justice matters. Justice matters, it matters.
Joining us now is Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, the Senate Finance Committee, the Senate Budget Committee, and he's the top Democrat on the important Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. And Senator, I don't remember every word of movie dialogue, but I know the 86 thing does not occur in Godfather 1, Godfather 2, or Godfather 3. But I defer to you in your experience as a former federal prosecutor. What do you make of Donald Trump's review of mob language and wiretaps you've listened to? And how scary are the seashells in Rhode Island?
The seashells in Rhode Island are very terrifying, Lawrence. Let me start by answering your question, not as a prosecutor, but as a senator who gets lots of threats. I mean, that's just the way things are right now. There are lots of right-wing loonies out there who make threats. And I can promise you, if an 86th threat came up, it wouldn't even be brought to my attention. It just doesn't register. And it particularly doesn't register if you put it up against the stuff that Trump himself says, like about my colleagues, that they have engaged in seditious behavior punishable by death. What kind of a signal is that? And this isn't an operation that Trump, Musk, Stephen Miller, and others run, where they can send out that kind of language, and they know that there are what I call the flying monkeys. If you've seen Wizard of Oz, there are flying monkeys out there on the internet who are waiting to be launched, waiting for a provocation, all revved up and angry and furious. And they will then deliver the threats. So I think they'd be better off investigating the president's threats and the operation of the flying monkeys that gets launched when he makes those threats. And because he's now protected by the Supreme Court by immunity, well, maybe you have to go to Stephen Miller, who called federal judges terrorists and set off a similar wave cascade of threats against those judges. I think that, I'm no great fan of Jim Comey, but I do think that his lawyers are going to have a really good time tearing apart the MAGA Department of Justice over this completely trumped up prosecution.
How far will this case go? What will it be? Are we looking at a dismissal here?
Well, from Comey's point of view, you'd like to get rid of it as quickly as you could. I think his earlier set of fake prosecutions were dismissed right at the get-go, right after the indictment came down. The indictment was dismissed. But from my point of view, I would like to see a little discovery take place. I'd like to see Comey's lawyers get all of the internal communications within the Department of Justice about this and the communications between the White House and the Department of Justice about this in order to have him be able to build the case for selective and vindictive prosecution. Those are documents and communications that are important to him building that defense. And so he has an important right to get into that material. And I think it would be pretty illuminating to see the back stuff. The Trump people put on a very good show when you go 1 inch deep. But if you dig a little bit behind it, if you actually get into the documents, they're not very smart about covering their tracks. So just for me, I really hope that it lasts for a while, because I really want to see the Comey litigation team dig through the discovery that is behind this prosecution.
We have to squeeze a commercial break here, Senator. When we come back, Todd Blanche said something about this today that absolutely would have earned him an F in law school. We'll see that right after this break. Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's former criminal defense lawyer, now his acting attorney